Hey guys, what's up? So tonight I just wanted to do a short and sweet video. And one of my editors that I like to use is just a text editor, but it's the Atom editor. And it really falls short when it comes to actually stepping through your code and figuring out what's going on. Granted, Python has some tools like PDB, and you can print the stack trace and stuff like that, but all that stuff kind of sucks, to be honest, like having to deal with that. Visual Studio, and this is another reason why I've said that C# is one of the better languages. As you start getting into really complex development, you really need some good tools to make your life easier. Visual Studio, I think, is better than PyCharm. Some of you Python developers may disagree. I think Visual Studio has really made some major headway, especially with 2015, and now you can have Python included, by default. But a lot of this, built-in stuff that it's just so beneficial. So one of the things that I was playing with tonight is the Python request library, and I actually wanted to step into the Python request code, and I really didn't have any way, a non-hackish way of being able to do it with the Atom editor or anything like that. So what I want to show you guys is how I would go about this. So here's the Python request folder. It's in my projects directory. First things first, I would do a virtual environment. I'm just going to name it env. That's typically what I'm calling my environments nowadays. I don't know why, but so I'll say virtual environment, and then I'm going to say no hyphen site packages. So I don't want any packages being shared through the global Python installation. So Python 3.5 is installed on my Windows machine. It's going to go through. It's going to install pip and all that crap for me. And then once this is done, I can go ahead and activate my environment. So I'm going to do this the longer way, where you go into the env, which is the name of the environment we just created. We'll go into the scripts folder, and then I just simply say activate. If you're on a Linux, you would say source activate. Then I'm going to go back to my root directory here. And then I'll just say pip install requests, which is for the Python request library. So this is just going to install Python requests inside my virtual environment. So you're going to see here that if I go into lib, go into site packages. Within the lib folder, you can now see requests is in there, and it's only installed in this one virtual environment. So now the benefit of this, though, is that this virtual environment has everything it needs, in the sense that Python will be able to operate from within this environment when my virtual environment is activated. And it's not going to contaminate or mess with any other projects that I may have going on. Now that I have all that set up here, let's go ahead and we want to open this project inside of Visual Studio. So if I open Visual Studio, I can go to open, or in fact, I'm going to say new project. And as long as you have Python tools installed, you're going to see other languages. If I click on Python, I can say from existing code. Here is where I'm going to actually give the folder for my Python request library. So I'll just select that folder there. And then I can give this a name, and I'll just call this Python requests. Click OK. And this is just saying that it's the default directory, so we'll click next. Now it's asking if we want the global or an auto-detected virtual environment, so we'll give it the right Python version, since I have multiple versions of Python installed on this machine. This next one, it says detect virtual environment, so hopefully this thing will be able to detect that I have a virtual environment in the directory where I'm trying to open this project, or essentially create this new project in Visual Studio. So this is telling me what my pyproj file is going to be called. Visual Studio has something called a solution file, and the solution file is used by Visual Studio to open all the files and projects related to one particular solution that you deem necessary every time you open Visual Studio and open the solution. A solution can contain multiple projects and a ton of files, but you typically want to keep solutions. You don't want a humongous solution. I've seen it where you get them so big that Visual Studio can barely manage them. But essentially, solutions can contain multiple projects, and the project file is more Python related. That way you can port that project from one environment to another. But here, make sure this detect virtual environment is selected. So now, if you look inside here, if I go into my env folder, You can see I have Python 3.5, and I know the text is kind of small. I apologize. I can't really get this any bigger, not without going through some major work here. But here you can see all the different libraries and everything inside my virtual environment. Now that's all code in Visual Studio that says, hey, we detected the environment. So it found my env environment that I had created when I first started this video. But what you want to do is go over to the Solution Explorer and go to the Show All Files. And when you click on that, you're going to see the actual env folder shows up. And that's what we want. So I'm going to actually include this entire environment into my project. Now this is a lot of files, and it may not even be a good idea to do this, but essentially this is what I'm going to do. So take the advice or not. But it might slow down your solution just a little bit because it's going to be quite a bit of files that are going to be added. Alright, so that took a bit of time, but now that I've done that, if I go into my lib and I go into the site packages, you can see that I have all this stuff in here. So here's the Python request library. So here is all the source code that I could, that is part of this library. So I click on any of this stuff, and you can see that I have all the source code. So that's cool. Alright, so let's create a first file here that we want to use. And I'm going to go to my project folder there, and I'm going to say add new item. I feel like normally it's not this slow, but I do have a lot of applications open right now, and I'm also screen capturing. So inside here, we'll just create an empty Python file, and we'll just call this start.py. So here I want to say import requests, and then we'll say URL equals request, if I could spell that correctly, .get, and then here I'm going to give the name of the website that I own, so I'm not requesting anybody else's. And then we can say print URL dot. So you can see that this thing wants to Alright, let me go ahead and try to run this now. So now we need to mark it as a startup file. We need to tell Python where to start. So I'm going to right click on the file, and I'll say set as startup file. And now you can see it's a little bit bolder. I know that the font's small, I'm sorry again. So now when I execute this, you can see, okay, we get this Unicode error, which really isn't that big of a deal. But in fact, if I wanted to get that resolved, I could just say encode UTF-8. So I can click stop and click run. So now I'm able to execute my program right from the command line, which is nice. If I wanted to get this a little bit larger, I could go to my font. We'll make it real large. There we go. So it's printing all the text, so it's pretty ugly looking, obviously, but I can close that out. But obviously at the click of a button now, I can just run the Python program, so it's much easier. But where it gets even better is that if I wanted to put a breakpoint, like if I put a breakpoint here and I go ahead and click start. Let me minimize this again. So now you can see that this part is stuck at this breakpoint line. So if I go in and click on this URL object, I can go into URL and I can see everything that this URL, which is really a request class object, consists of. You can see it has cookies, which is like a cookie jar class object there. You can see its encoding is UTF-8. So even though it's UTF-8, it's still choked until I actually encoded it as UTF-8 explicitly. So you would think that might be a bug. I'm not sure. And then you see all the headers and everything. So all those headers being sent. And then if we go down to the text, this is where you can see the actual HTML of the page. So since we've requested, let me copy all this. So I could right click, copy value, open up a notepad and paste that in there so you can see all the source code for the page. And in case you didn't know, if I type, so you can see we're at hipstercode.com. So we're definitely, here's the title, Hipster Code Home. So we definitely went across the web. We grabbed the source code. All that stuff exists inside the Python request library. But once again, if I click on like F12 for this get, it should pull up information. In fact, let me stop debugging real quick. If I click up F12, this tells me the init. So here's where it's grabbing get. So I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to get into all this, but if I do Control-Shift-F, I can actually search the entire solution, which is going to search through all those lib packages and everything. And I can explicitly state that I just want to search the request library folder if I wanted to do that. Like you have all kinds of options. When you say inside here how you want to search, I could say find options. I can give like regular expressions and all that stuff. This is where it says entire solution, so I may not want to select the entire solution. I can even just explicitly state projects, and I'll go to my Python requests, env, lib, site packages, and I can even say request and then give this a custom name. We'll just call this request. Click apply, click OK. So now I can say just look in requests, and I can say get. So now it's only going to look inside that request folders, and I can start going through all the code where it references get. So you can see here a lot of this stuff is inside just but basically if you want to start learning a lot of the ins and outs of a Python library like this, you absolutely have to have some sort of editor. You have to have a debugger, and I prefer Visual Studio. So once again, I mean I use Visual Studio a lot, but this is one of the reasons why you would want to use Python tools with Visual Studio to get some of this, to basically get a better understanding of how stuff works. So anyway, guys, let me know if you want me to give more videos on how I would go about debugging and stepping through a complex program. But you can, if you had a similar setup like this, you could actually set breakpoints in the actual source code of the libraries that you're interacting with, and not just the code that you're writing yourself. So it's an invaluable, is that the way to say it? But it's definitely a very trusty tool that you need if you're going to do any sort of complex debugging, not just in Python, but really any language for that matter. All right, guys, so this is just another example of one of the reasons why Visual Studio and Microsoft does do a good job when it comes to debugging and tools for programmers. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.